This podcast is for mature audiences. Suicide is discussed in this episode. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to Season 2 of Fool Me Twice. There's an accessibility transcript that can be found at our website, foolmetwicepod.com.
Beware, my friend, trouble roads are to come. Tall grass on the snakes fall not for their charm. Lift your head, forget the dance in your pride. Sometimes in life we need to be fooled twice.
Episode 8, Losing a Friend. On July 12, 2004, the De Beers Diamond Company voluntarily pled guilty to a 10-year-old charge of price fixing in the industrial diamond market. They agreed to pay a $10 million fine to settle the case. This opened the company up to doing business in the USA again, and it carried with it no obligation or promise to change its shady tactics. De Beers said that its new strategy was to be in total legal compliance around the world, and that it would create a new modern De Beers. People in the industry speculate whether this guilty plea came as a result of a significant loss in the diamond market share, after new mines were discovered in Russia, Australia, and other African countries. It's possible that it has become too dangerous for De Beers not to do business in the US. On top of that, De Beers is still working to shake off the memory of its past support for the apartheid regime in South Africa, as well as its links to conflict diamonds. It was around the early 2000s that De Beers gave up its global monopoly on diamonds. Since then, problems in the supply chain have become impossible to ignore, and De Beers had its worst year of profits in 2019 since the 2009 financial crisis. Now De Beers finds itself with only a 29.5% market share, controlling just 22% of production. The Australians and the Russian mines have skimmed a lot off the top, but it wasn't just De Beers that had a bad year in 2019, it was everyone. Chapter 1, Tiffany's Real Story. I was able to find more detailed records from Tiffany's court appearances. I found explanations of her sentences, written by the judge who presided over her trials. It also helped me to piece together more of her timeline. I was also able to make contact with one of the solicitors that represented her back in 2009. As I wrote this podcast, I started to feel uncomfortable with how little I was actually able to learn about Tiffany. Here's this woman with a life and a history that I can only see through the lens of what I'm able to find through the Hong Kong judiciary records. I can only know about her via what she did wrong. In a sentencing from a court case in 2010, she was charged with 12 counts of obtaining property by deception. In 8 of these 12 charges, Tiffany had agreed to the purchase of something, paid for it by check. Then the vendor gave her what she was buying and the check bounced once she was gone. She had been operating in this way for more than 20 years. In a judge's note on her 2010 sentencing of 40 months in prison, he writes that according to a psychologist's report that was submitted as part of her defense, she clearly had obsessive-compulsive disorder. He says that he accepts that Tiffany was remorseful since she pled guilty to her crimes. This is something that keeps being corroborated by all the things that she's done. She could have disappeared after scamming both Lisa and Sally out of their money, but she didn't. Maybe she really was worried about Sally sending the police after her, which was a bluff, but Tiffany certainly didn't know that. From all the commonalities I've been able to notice among scam stories, there is absolutely a tactic that plays to the scammer's advantage, and that's installing. A lot of what Tiffany did was stall for time. She made it look like she was away in Canada and therefore couldn't rectify the situation straight away. She told Sally that she would pay her, and the fact that Sally held hope that it was actually true meant Tiffany had all this time on her side. The solicitor told me that to his mind, she was a pleasant young woman who, in terms of the offences she committed, was punching well above her weight for who she was. He said, I would probably have forgotten her had she been a regular, small-value shoplifter or the like. But her crimes were ambitious, involving handbags selling for much more than any member of my family would ever think of paying, at least so I hope. And, as you will see from the records, other big-value offences. And then he said something that kinda knocked me out. When he was talking about some of her early crimes, which involved, as he put it, obscenely priced handbags, he said, Hong Kong is a place that encourages people to know the price of everything, but the value of nothing. Here's another diamond story.
Don't remember exactly when I started to really fall in love with diamonds, to be honest with you, but my mother and grandmother actually always had such beautiful jewellery. Nothing expensive and not necessarily even diamonds, but things that they'd either have passed down to them through our family or that my father or grandfather had bought for them on wedding anniversaries and things like this. And I just remember always thinking how beautiful they were and how proud and happy my mum would be when she would wear them. And I suppose really I didn't have any real diamonds or anything until probably into my 30s when I could actually afford some myself. And one of my friends where I lived in Asia was a diamond broker. And I remember visiting her store and thinking, wow, do you know what? Actually, I really like to buy myself one of these. And I think as a woman, it's quite empowering to, work hard and actually be able to afford to buy nice things for yourself. I'm not as into going clothes shopping every single weekend and buying loads of shoes and handbags and things like that and makeup. But actually what I really enjoy is really beautiful jewellery. So to be able to work hard and afford pieces of jewellery for myself to be able to wear, I find that really empowering as a woman. And I don't have loads of different pieces. I only have a few. But those I do have, I really, really love. And I think the other good thing about diamonds as well, in terms of buying them, is their investment value. A lot of the pieces I've bought and some of them that I've had made through my diamond broker have now gone up in value due to the value of diamonds. So if I was looking to have purchased them for investment purposes, which I wasn't, but if I was, then I could look to sell them for more money, which is not the case with a lot of other things I've purchased over the years.
Simon decides that he needs to get out of the diamond industry, and fast.
So my partner in that was, he was getting a bit more greedy. I said, this is time to bring this chapter to an end. And I had a 2-year run out of that. I walked away from it. Just because I could see it long term, it would take me down a spiral. When you have that kind of money coming in, when you have, you can pick a wrong path very easily. One of the guys that continued from that era, he made billions out of it. But today he's watching his back. You see, he had a good time, but that's it. Them good times are finished. Now, I knew from back then, this is a good time right now, but this good time will come to an end, and it won't be such a good memory. So it's best to walk away from it right now because I've had a good time at it. And as soon as they put the X-ray machines up, they were coming up in Europe as well. Things were getting harder. And I knew that if I didn't stop now, then God knows what would happen later on. So I just knew to stop where I was at. I said, this is 2 years of fun I've had out of this. I can tell you this. I can remember the bank manager sending me a letter saying there's too much money coming through this account. Well, do you know something? I managed to move things abroad. So I managed to keep things fairly quiet after that. I was very lucky. Put it this way, I pulled out at the right time. And thanks to the bank manager telling me that there's too many funds coming in here, he told me that at the right time as well. I met a bank manager here in Scotland, and he told me he took a flight to Africa once and he tried to do that too. And I said to him, I bet you went with your flip-flops and your sandals. And he laughed. He says, I did actually. He goes, they must have spotted you from a mile away because they gave him some fake diamonds and all the rest of it. But to be honest with you, it's all about who you know out there. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know out there, especially in these kind of countries. And I've always known that. So I was just very lucky to be coming back. If it wasn't for the recession in 2007, had that not happened, I wouldn't have come back. Had I not got that flight to London, bumped into my mate and flipping that coin. So this all happened at a flip of a coin. I learned about the whole industry through doing it. The thrill. There was in the travelling, in the cutting and polishing. See if you ever see a diamond getting cut and polished and then stuck into something and you put it in your ear. But see, I stuck one in my ear and that's when I got it. I was like, oh my God, look at that shine. Right? And then I got it for a woman because the first girlfriend I sort of went out with for a while, I gave her a diamond ring. And oh shit. I even got it cut out specially, for her. And she just seen a smile on her face. I was like, bloody hell, one little stone. And look at the smile on her face. I couldn't believe it. So I understood what diamonds can do. Puts a smile on a bird's face. Yeah. That's priceless. But I'll tell you one thing, what a time. What an amazing adventure. What a chapter to life that was. One of the last sort of times you could do it the way I did it.
Hi Tiffany, I was just calling to invite you to an evening on Tuesday night. I am currently doing a course that has been amazing at impacting my happiness in life. It's all about giving you the tools to help you live your best life. I would like to invite you to come on Tuesday between 6:30 and 9:30 to learn about it for yourself. Can you come? There will be Cantonese translation.
Okay, can come. Where? It's perfect. We can settle on tomorrow and meet on Tuesday.
Fantastic. The address is in Kowloon Tong.
Yep, thank you, Sally. See you on Tuesday.
Good, Tiffany. This is the map for Tuesday evening. Have a good day today. I look forward to hearing from you once you've done the transfer today.
Yep, thank you, Sally.
There is no cost for this evening, but if it really inspires you and you want to enroll in the course, the cost is $7,200. If you don't have the money to enroll, I will lend it to you and we can discuss a payment plan. What I can promise you is that if you choose to do this course, it will make a big impact on your happiness in life.
Thank you so much, Sally. Let's see on tomorrow and discuss.
Sorry, to make it clear, when I say this evening, I meant on Tuesday night. There is no cost for this.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Sally.
Hi, Tiffany. All going planned with the transfer today? Hi, Tiffany. What happened today? Hi, Tiffany. Can you please call me before 3 p.m. today? Hi, Tiffany. Are you still coming this evening? Despite not paying yesterday, I would still really like for you to come. I really think this program can be really impactful on your happiness in life. Are you okay? Tiffany, are you not responding to my messages because you're embarrassed that you didn't pay me the money on Monday? Tiffany, can you please call me? I need to tell you something.
Chapter 2. Charcoal.
No reply. I thought, okay, well, maybe she was intimidated by me asking to meet with her. Maybe it was too much. And I thought maybe I pushed her too far. And then on the Wednesday, I didn't hear anything from her again, and I sent her a message saying, are you okay? And I got no reply, and I could see that she hadn't read my messages. And I thought, oh my God, I think she's probably been caught by the police and they've taken her phone or something. So I called the police officer who was assigned to my case, who was completely useless. I left a message on his phone and I sent him an email saying, have you heard from Tiffany? I've lost contact with her. He didn't reply to my phone call or email. So then Thursday, again, I'd heard nothing from her. She hadn't been reading any of my messages. And I actually genuinely started to worry about her at this point. So I went down to the police station, asked for Mr. Chan. He wasn't there. And this female officer came out of this room. I was sitting in the waiting area and came out in front of everybody and said, oh yeah, Tiffany's died. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, she committed suicide on Monday. My jaw dropped. I was standing there speechless. I felt like I was winded. And I felt really sad. I was in total shock. And she took me aside and then we sat in a room and she's like, oh, I'm sorry if I upset you. And I'm like, yeah, you've upset me. Like, this is a woman that I've actually felt like I've got to know over the course of the last few months. And someone's just lost their life. And, you know, I almost felt some sense of responsibility. And it's, you know, it's serious. Someone killed himself over this. And it's absolutely not the way that I wanted it to end for her. And she was obviously a really troubled woman and had a lot of baggage that she was carrying around with her. And even though I was angry and annoyed at the problems that she caused for me, I didn't want it to be the cause of the end of her life. And I was sat there crying in front of this police officer, and she probably thought I was mental. You know, like, here's a woman that's stolen all this money from me. Why are you concerned that she's killed herself? But I did. It was really emotional for me. And I called George, the lawyer, and I told him what had happened. And he was really unemotional about it as well. He was like, oh, well, she was a criminal. And he's like, you know, well, I guess that, you know, there goes the money that you were going to get back from her. And I wasn't thinking about that at all. It was the furthest from my mind. It wasn't actually even a consideration at the time. I just thought, this poor woman. That's really sad. Yeah, so it was a real shock. I hadn't expected that at all. When she hadn't replied to me, I thought, oh, she's been caught. And the fact that, you know, she told me that we were going to meet, and I built up all these expectations around actually meeting her and me thinking that I was going to try and help her. You know, that was all my fantasy, I guess. And, you know, I try and think about what was going through her mind before she took her own life. And I was told by the police officer she did it with charcoal, burning charcoal in her room at her own home, which is apparently a common way of death for these people that suicide with wanting to end their own life in Hong Kong. I'd never heard of it before, but the police officer showed me a photo of charcoal burning. I'm like, oh, okay, wow. And I thought, wow, you know, like, this woman must have been under some serious pressure. And I'm sure that whoever else she was stealing from probably weren't trying to be her friend. So she was probably under some serious heat.
Here's Doctors Scott and Shiloh to offer some thoughts.
I would say absolutely that most con artists kind of operate on a sense of entitlement. They live a parasitic lifestyle. They engage in a parasitic crime. It's not just about like stealing or burglarizing one object from someone's home. It's about manipulating someone emotionally. And especially the best cons apparently are the long cons that really kind of end up being a great payoff in the end. This situation is complex. You know, once again, we're looking at this as mental health professionals who have an intersection with law and criminality. And we're looking at the suicidality is really the factor that throws me off. And it actually opens up an entire new doorway of questions for me because, you know, I want to know so many things. I want to know, were there drugs involved? Was there a drug lifestyle involved? Was there anything like that that would have enhanced sort of the suicidality, the previous hospitalization? Because generally, people on the antisocial end of the spectrum aren't particularly suicidal. People on the narcissistic end, not particularly suicidal. Now, there are other characterological sort of spectrum issues, such as borderline personality disorder, where, you know, borderline is when you're on the receiving end of like all the glory of a borderline, you feel great, and then they can flip on you really quickly. And suicidality is one of the factors that we look at a lot in chronic borderline. But once again, we just don't really have a lot of information to work on.
Someone who dies by suicide really doesn't see a way out. And I think that's easy to connect those parallels in this story. If she felt like the pressure was on, they feel like that there's no way out, there's no hope for the future, that they are backed into a corner, as well as a lot of other types of thinking, you know, that they might be a burden to others, that there's just no coming back from this. There's no other option. Even though if we are not suicidal ourselves, we can think of worst case scenario and always think that there's another option. But people who have suicidal ideation chronically, that's always on the table for them. That's always a consideration. And usually it's longstanding and it's been there a while. There are circumstances where people can very quickly and impulsively have suicide attempts, but I don't think that's her case because we already know that she tried to die by suicide once before. Yes, it contrasts a bit with the types of personality disorders and traits that we typically see with con artists who are engaged in that behavior over their lives.
Roger Grimes, who's an expert in the world of scams, offers his thoughts on what might have motivated Tiffany.
I mean, certainly she was obviously wrestling with some really tough demons, right? You know, maybe she wasn't narcissistic enough, right? A narcissist has no stress. Everybody else is wrong. Tiffany obviously had issues of stress and felt overwhelmed. You know, maybe it's even likened to a sniper where you have all these snipers, you know, in the military, and most people handle it just well. But then you get this, you know, you get these snipers that end up with PSTD because it turned out they were not emotionally correct for that particular role. It takes a certain person to be a con artist, right? And those people are emotionally disconnected with the severity of what they're getting ready to do. So obviously, Tiffany, she wasn't emotionally disconnected enough. Like if the con artist psychiatrist had done an exam on her, they go, nope, you actually have too much empathy for the victims. This is not a good fit for you. We need somebody that's emotionally disconnected.
One more time, here's Sally's assistant.
And of course, it ended in complete tragedy with her taking her own life. So nobody won, really, in the end, I think. But yeah, we certainly learned a lot. I do think that all of the people who were involved in the sale did everything that they could to their best of their ability to make sure that we were covering our butts. But it just wasn't enough because there was one huge mistake that occurred. And that was perhaps when the finance manager had checked the bank accounts. Again, we don't know exactly what it said on that day that it came through. Did it just say deposit or did it immediately say check deposit? That's something that only she'll know. But yeah, because of that one critical link, obviously something like this was able to occur. We haven't had any new staff since this occurred. So all of us know now that even if somebody comes through Sally's direct email and says that they were referred by somebody, which, you know, we did ask. I asked her, who were you referred by? And she gave a first name, and then it was a pretty generic one. I can't quite remember what the name was. And they had such a great experience with us. And, you know, she was so excited to work with us. But now, of course, we'll push more on that, especially if it's a high value item. We're going to be asking her who that person was. We'll probably double check with that person. Oh, thank you so much for referring so-and-so. We're going to meet with them tomorrow. And then, you know, we would have known that she's not actually legitimate if that person didn't check out. Another process we're putting in place is that if a high value transaction like this occurs, it will never be pushed through if Sally's not in the country, if she's not there in the office to approve the transaction. So those are some key points that would probably avoided this kind of a mess. Prior to this appointment with the client, that wasn't anything that had ever been discussed. So we thought we were doing the right thing by bringing an extra colleague into the room, having the sales assistant also involved, speaking in the language that she can speak, accompanying her down to HSBC Premier, taking a picture of the transfer slip, speaking with our finance manager, having her check the accounts in real time, double checking that that amount can't come out of the accounts, and receiving the go-ahead. Do we all feel responsibility? Of course we do, but how much can we beat ourselves up if we had done our parts and then there had been that one link that kind of failed and it was just a critical failure? To her defense, she was also running around Sri Lanka and she wasn't even supposed to be working. And I don't think, of course, that's not an excuse. Maybe she should have said, you guys just don't go through with the transfer for now. But again, those processes weren't in place. A lot of things had to go just Tiffany's way. And it just did. It was very clear that she was a professional. She knew what she was doing. She's done it so many times before. She obviously knew the bank processes as well, that it would take a couple of days to clear. She knew that it would still be in the accounts most likely the following day, but then maybe it would reflect at the end of the day. So she was clearly a professional.
Sally's accountant had some more thoughts to share.
I used to work for big corporations and I would, typically not be involved with the day-to-day running of a small business like this. And that's what drew me to it as well. It's much more personal and, felt like making a difference, which is why obviously I felt terrible that this should happen. I think I had far too much trust, and it would be funny coming from an accountant, but I've never dealt with the on-the-ground kind of stuff where I wouldn't have trust. It was always not trusting the people who gave me the figures and then going through them rigorously. It's not dealing with people and then, not necessarily trusting them or asking the questions like, did you know the client? And then causing them to turn around and go, did we know the client? Is there anything to tell us that we should know the client or whatever? Yeah, I had far too much trust. And then also, I guess, because a lot of the clients who come in, they're Australian or they're expats, they know Sally, they've been referred by Sally. Quite often they know girls in the office. There's very much a sense of community and trust and people knowing each other. So this outlier was completely unexpected. Of course, I was ashamed and embarrassed and so shocked that I actually considered myself quite savvy, and then to be tricked like this. And I blamed myself a lot. My husband would be sitting there going, it's not your fault. It's not completely your fault. Of course, there are things that are your fault. But I did still think that, especially in a small business, an accountant is a big part of the backbone of it. And I failed Sally in that. But I guess, embarrassment, shock, just complete shock, anger. I was really angry that I could let this happen, that, this could happen. And just disgust. I was just disgusted because, a lot of those jewelers, they do compete and stuff, but they're very honourable to each other. And I guess I just fell into the habit of expecting them to behave like that, all of them. And she'd known a lot of them and she'd been around various people that Sally knew. So when it started to filter down, she got calls saying, we knew. It happened. I do sometimes think, well, then if you'd known, couldn't you have contacted some of these other people and not let it happen to them? But some of them were too busy trying to recover their own costs, I guess, as well. I think getting a lot of the money back really helped because it wasn't my money. Obviously, I put in about, I think, I can't even remember, about $100,000 at the time to pay suppliers, but then that was paid back to me from the company account. But getting the money back, because that's Sally's then own funds, right? Getting that back, it wasn't all of it, but it wasn't too far off. It wasn't millions off. That really helped. But then I try not to dwell on it or think about it because I do get really, really angry. But it has helped that, obviously this COVID year, I quit back in February and I haven't bothered looking for work again. But should I look for work again? I think one thing that's going to be really important to me is that I need to really put into play all the things that we were taught, that I kind of stopped thinking mattered in a small business. I kind of went back to this old-fashioned feeling of trusting people and taking people at face value when in fact it's a very cutthroat world. It's not like it's some corporation, so it's not like I could just say, she can afford it. So no, getting a lot of it back was helpful, but I wish we could have got all of it back. That would have been the best case scenario. But unfortunately, Tiffany did what she did. I felt sorry for her, but because I was still very angry at that stage, I do admit that I just felt, damn it, we're not going to get any more money back. Sally was very upset. I think she'd actually, over the time talking to her, she'd kind of developed a connection. She really empathized with her and she was really stunned by it. I was more kind of angry and just thought she'd take an easy way out.
Chapter 3, Where Do We Go Now?
This letter is dated the 3rd of July 2020. Dear Lisa, Guy and Philip, the objective of this letter is to have you all meet with me on Wednesday the 8th of July at 5 p.m, or at another time that suits us all, at my studio on Queen's Road in Central, or at a place that suits you all better. I will explain the reasons why I would like you to all come, and I hope with all my heart that you will oblige. All of us are diamond dealers, all with decades of experience in the industry. I believe that all of you will be with me to admit that this fraud that we've all been involved in is something that none of us have ever experienced before. Every person that I have shared this story with can't believe the events. It's like some crazy Hollywood movie, and at the end of the story, it results in Tiffany's death, which was truly shocking. Tiffany Wong was a woman who obviously had some serious mental health issues. She fooled Lisa, and she fooled me, and in between, she used you, Philip, and Guy to commit this brazen fraud. While I was dealing with her post her stealing the stone from us, I genuinely felt sorrow for her. She had got herself into so much trouble, and I could sense that she did feel remorse for it. Unfortunately, the only way out of the trouble she saw for herself was to commit suicide, and she died in January of this year. Tiffany told me that she sold the diamond she stole from Lisa to you, Philip, for $1 million in early October 2019. I have this in writing from her. I also know that I paid Guy about $1.64 million, so there has been $640,000 made in the proceeds from this crime between Guy and Philip on this fraud. I would like both of you to understand that this was not a legitimate business deal, and that these are proceeds of crime and were made at the cost of 2 victims of the fraud, myself and Lisa. As any person would do in my situation, I have sought the help of the police, lawyers, and my insurance company. I hope that you can sympathise that this has come with huge emotional stress for me. I have been dealing with this since October 2019, and it's been a daily struggle. It's been really hard, guys. I did everything that I could to try and claim as much of the loss back from Tiffany as I could. I haven't gotten anywhere with my insurance company, who have been a total pain in the ass to deal with and refuse to acknowledge the situation as a fraud. This leaves me with a $1.13 million loss. As we have all been party to this fraud, I feel that it leaves us all partly responsible. I believe we are all good people and all run our businesses honestly and ethically. I have been a small family business, and this has hurt me. Philip, I don't suspect that you knew you were buying a stolen diamond from Tiffany, and Guy, I see no reason for you to suspect you were selling me a stolen diamond, especially since I assume you paid Philip a fair market value for it. However, you do both play a part in the crime by being associated, even if it wasn't intentional. Philip and Guy, I sincerely hope that you consider profiting out of a colleague from the industry's misfortune as not appropriate. You've all been involved in the trail of Tiffany's fraud, and it's not right that you should benefit from it financially. I've thought of myself in your position, and although it might be sad to say goodbye to what seemed like a nice windfall, realising later that it's at someone else's expense, someone just like yourself from the industry, would not seem right to me. I really hope that you feel the same. This is my desperate cry for help from you all. I've hated dealing with the lawyers who just want to sue you all for wrong title, and I've had enough of it. It's depressing. If we go down this avenue, it would cause all of us to lose. I don't want that for any of us. Guy, you received that letter from my lawyer. I didn't particularly want to send it, but it was the professional advice that I was given, and I was just doing what I was told by the people I thought had my best interest in mind. If we all do go to court, it means years of pain and expense for all of us. I'd really like to try and avoid that for all of us if possible. I don't think it's fair for me to have to deal with this loss on my own, and I certainly don't think it's fair that Philip and Guy profit from it. So that you are all aware, the diamond is currently in Lisa's possession. The whole thing is a mess, and I don't want to have to involve any more lawyers and cause even more suffering for any of us. I'm not willing to walk away from this loss on my own, so I'm asking all of you to come and meet with me and discuss a fair resolution. Perhaps I should have made the invitation when the first theft happened, but it's taken time for the whole story to come to light and to understand what role each of us had to play in this terrible crime. I hope now that we all know the outcome since Tiffany's death and that you will help me to share the burden. I have requested the help from a third party who is completely unrelated to this crime, but is someone who is well known and respected in our industry. I have asked for his help to mediate our discussion and provide his opinion on what he considers a fair resolution without any bias. If you agree to this meeting, I will tell you who this is and ensure that you are comfortable with this person mediating before we hold the meeting. Please help me avoid any further dealings with the police and lawyers and come to my table to have an amicable discussion. Please let me know if you will accept my invitation. This letter is sent without prejudice. Kind regards, Sally. And no one replied. I heard from Lisa to ask if anybody had replied to the letter, and I told her no. So the day of the proposed meeting, I actually called Guy, I think a few days before the meeting was proposed, and he answered and told me that he couldn't speak right then and that he would call me back, and he never did. So, I can speculate, and I feel like Philip probably does this sort of stuff all the time.
Philip is the one who owns both Diamond Selection and Brixton.
He's got this business which is a pawnbroker, and then this other company that fronts as a legitimate diamond trading company, but he's procuring diamonds through proceeds of crime. So I feel like he probably does this all the time, and he couldn't give a shit about the loss that I've incurred. I really do legitimately believe that they had no reason to believe that the diamond that they were buying was stolen. I assume that they had paid fair market value for it.
She's talking about Guy, her supplier, and his business, Oracle.
So I assume that they made maybe $100,000 profit, something like that. And Philip's taken the windfall. He's profited over probably $500,000. So Philip's sitting high and pretty, but that's probably his business. He probably takes stolen diamonds that he pays well under market value for, because because these people that have stolen the diamonds, just anything in their pocket is a win for them when they've stolen the stone. So Philip, this is his business, I believe. Philip is in the business of crime. He is a stain on our industry. So where it leaves us now. So we've sent a letter to Guy saying, you've sold us a stolen diamond, we want our money back for it. We've basically got a letter back from his lawyer to say, go to hell. Don't waste our time and money anymore. So the next step would be to take them to court and to pursue it in court, which would mean so much more money for everyone. I sat with a lawyer and she said, this is what you would have to be ready for to undertake this. This is probably going to take years out of your life. You're going to be put on a stage basically where you're going to be targeted by their legal team as being the crook, as, the person at fault. And, that's the play that they're going to make, to say that I'm in the wrong. That's how their legal team are going to point it out to save them from having to pay me the sum of the cost of the diamond, which sounds just so draining. And it's already been so draining having to deal with all of this, to have to take this to court and to be scrutinised and made to be the bad guy. It could cost us millions of dollars. And the reality of it is, and the way the legal system works, is even if we were successful and we won the case, it is true that if you win a case that your counterparty has to pay your legal fees, but there's deductions, and they will deduct as much as they can, and that will leave us out of pocket potentially millions of dollars.
I don't know whether it would be interesting or disappointing for Sally to know that in New York City among diamond dealers, the industry has rejected state-created law and instead operates under its own system of private adjudication. They adhere to complex rules and sanctions, with verdicts often handed down secretively and enforced by those within the business. So if Sally were in New York, disputes like this would be expected to be handled internally and kept out of the courts. It's not been perfect. In truth, there are articles available in legal journals which talk about the more recent erosion of trust in the business, and by extension, the adjudication system it created, but it's nice to imagine a reality where members of an industry hold each other accountable. Remember from last episode, the 7 factors of the psychology of persuasion? Well, it occurred to me that the lowest common denominator of all the stories in this investigation so far was the simplicity of people persuading other people. Tiffany persuaded Sally's employees to trust her, to let her have the diamonds. The diamond industry persuaded all of us that diamonds are rare, valuable, and a symbol of eternal, undying love. So I'm going to look at the events we've seen so far through the lens of those 7 factors that make persuasion work. The 7 are reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, social proof, liking, and unity. I'll go through them one by one, don't worry. I'll start with the first, reciprocity. The idea that if you give someone something, they will have no choice but to feel at least a little bit in debt to you. That this can nudge an interaction more into the favor of the giver. It's really easy to look at diamonds through this lens. It's the ultimate exchange, and the amount that it's actually balanced in its reciprocity is arguable. I give you a ring, you agree to give me the rest of your life. Or to be a little less cynical about it, I give a ring in exchange for the promise that you will marry me. I invest 2 months' salary into our relationship, and you'll respond in kind. As for how Tiffany relates to this reciprocity factor, it makes me wonder even more what she was like in the beginning, when she first came in to Ryder Diamonds. Was she excessively complimentary? She did say she was going to give one of the diamonds to her sister in Canada, and that might have put something positive in the minds of Sally's assistants. I feel like there's something significant in the fact that Tiffany did keep paying Sally. So maybe there was reciprocity going the other way here, in that Sally felt obliged to keep Tiffany away from the authorities in exchange. Next, we have scarcity as a factor of persuasion. The belief that something is rare or hard to get means that we want it more. By now, you're well aware of how the diamond industry has used this by carefully and deliberately curating an image of a diamond's rarity. You know this, you've listened to the podcast. But it's interesting to note that they even managed to create scarcity on multiple levels. They invented the grading system of diamonds, because while diamonds with poor clarity, a lot of inclusions, and that are colored as off-white or yellow might be a dime a dozen, the rarest and most coveted D-flawless is seen as a class above the rest. Where Tiffany's concerned, it's possible that scarcity played a role in a few ways, but I'm willing to bet that the way that this worked in Tiffany's favor most significantly was that for the employees at Ryder Diamonds, customers themselves came fairly scarcely. With big-ticket purchases like diamonds, it's not quantity of customers coming in the door that a business can often bank on, but the fact that every so often they'll come in and drop a big hunk of cash on something. And the fact that Tiffany was willing at the first meeting to buy 2 diamonds outright while the boss was on holiday, that must have seemed like a very rare and very special occasion. And the employees at Ryder Diamonds were excited. Next is authority. This is the idea that we're more willing to put stock in information that comes from a source when we see it as having authority. That's why a lab coat or a degree framed on a wall can often reassure us, especially when there's money changing hands. This was a tricky one for the diamond industry to orchestrate. Certainly, over the years, De Beers was developing a reputation for itself as being a giant in the industry, and with that comes a certain amount of authority. But they recognized that they needed to come up with a way to give authority to the way they valued diamonds. And this is what they did when De Beers and N.W. Iyer came up with the 4 C's. I bet you've heard of the 4 C's, even before listening to this podcast. And do you remember where you heard it first? Maybe not. Has someone recited them to you as though color, cut, clarity, and carat are a self-evident truth, not needing explanation of how or why they can so easily define value? That's an example of authority. Tiffany did a good job of constructing her image as a person who had some authority in this world. And by this world, I mean the world of people who have enough money to buy diamonds. We know that she didn't, in fact, have the amount of money needed to be included in the upper class of Hong Kong, but she behaved as if she did. She knew the questions to ask, and assumptions were made by the sales assistants about her right to be asking them. Then she took them down to the bank, and with expertly performed authority, told them that she had deposited the money without actually having done so. If she had seemed unsure of herself, it would not have gone so smoothly. The fourth factor of the psychology of persuasion is consistency. We are pattern-seeking creatures, and we're comforted by familiarity in the way that people behave towards us. It's consistent with social norms that when a man proposes to a woman, he should do it with a diamond. This does not merit questioning for most people. It's accepted as just the way things are done. That's how the diamond industry plays out the factor of consistency. It has created a series of behaviors and purchasing decisions and made them normal. For Tiffany, the consistency factor worked strongly in her favor, and she really didn't have to do very much to make it so. The employees at Ryder Diamonds had only ever seen people do what they said they were going to do. People entered into agreements to purchase diamonds, and they paid the money. Based on the consistency principle, they had no reason or need to suspect that Tiffany was going to do anything but that. Next, we have social proof. And to me, this is the silver bullet of the diamond industry. When something is subject to social proof, we're persuaded because everyone else is doing it. If all my friends got proposed to by their fiancés getting down on one knee and presenting that little velvet box with a flourish, then it's perfectly natural that I should want that too. It's part of our very natural, very human want to be in the in-group of like-minded people. This works especially well when the thing that signifies we're in is a luxury item that carries with it all the aspirational symbolism that a diamond has. Someone to be with forever, an investment in love, security, building a life together, being chosen. The list goes on. Where Tiffany's concerned, this one worked for her because she posed as a woman in Hong Kong with money. And the social expectation is that wives in Hong Kong often have large sums of money at their disposal. The social proof was there that Tiffany was going to be just the same as them. The next factor that persuades is liking. If someone is nice to you, you're more likely to be persuaded by them. If you like someone, or better yet, if you want to be like someone, you will be more swayed by what they have to say. NWIA tapped advantageously into this potential by tying diamonds inextricably to the rich and famous. Hollywood starlets, who you were already being persuaded to love and admire, were dripping with sparkling gems. Newspapers published full-page articles about gifts of diamonds that exchanged hands between the elites of the silver screen, and diamonds, real diamonds, not stage jewels, adorned the necks, wrists, and fingers of movie stars. Diamonds, too, have evolved past purely Hollywood glamour and have deeply influenced Bollywood, as well as the American hip-hop aesthetic of aspirational bling. As far as liking goes, all Tiffany could do was be as nice as possible, and we know from all accounts that she certainly was. Even after she had clearly and unequivocally scammed Sally, she was apologetic, responsive, and just nice. Sally and Tiffany developed what you could really only describe as a friendship. This might have been the most important persuasive factor that Tiffany had at her disposal, and it probably is the one that kept her out of prison. Finally, the last but certainly not the least persuasive factor is unity. Unity tells us that people want to feel part of a group, like they belong, like they're in something bigger than themselves as individuals. To me, it feels like this one overlaps with some of the earlier factors, like social proof and liking, which lets people feel like they're doing things in the same way as the way other people like them do things. The need for acceptance and to be seen as socially in comes into play here, and it brings to mind that really cliché moment that you'll see in the movies where a woman has just been proposed to and she announces it to her friends by flinging her left hand forward, fingers splayed, to a chorus of approving squeals. This is unity in action. Being approved of by your group for achieving something you all value solidifies the structure of that group, however unspoken these agreed upon values are. For Tiffany, her use of the unity principle was in dressing the part, speaking with authority, speaking kindly to the sales assistants, and towing the line of what was expected of someone in the social group she was appearing to be in. Crucially, Tiffany had told them that she knew a friend of Sally's, and therefore was let in the door with much more ease than she would have if she came as a stranger without a contact point. Sally kept emphasizing that this is an industry built on trust. You're supposed to KYC, know your client. Even though it was a lie and Tiffany didn't actually know a friend of Sally's. Because of the unity principle, this made Tiffany an insider rather than an outsider, and it greased the wheels in Tiffany's favor. All of these aspects converge and overlap to bring us these stories, the big story of how we've all been persuaded to think a certain way about diamonds, and the smaller one, how one woman could be persuasive enough to illicitly acquire 2 of these gems, and then further, how she could stay out of deep trouble for so long. Chapter 4. Tiffany is gone. I'm looking at a photograph of Tiffany, which is taken from the CCTV footage in Sally's diamond business showroom. The camera looms above her, looking down as she's alone at a large round table, with a juice container next to her. She's wearing black, and her hair is mid-length and a bit lighter than brown. She's wearing sunglasses on her head. I'm looking at her facial expression, and her brows are furrowed and she looks down. I'm imagining that she's nervous. She's by herself, waiting. She doesn't seem relaxed. She rubs her hands together as she looks absently at a spot that I can't see. In the next frames, the salespeople come in, and suddenly there's a flurry of activity. Her face lights up. She leans over and almost bows as she shakes someone's hand. In another moment, she's talking with one of the assistants. Her eyebrows are raised and her face is open. She looks attentive and friendly. In another frame, she peers across at the diamonds, both hands resting purposefully on the table. Her lips look pursed. She looks like she belongs there. Chapter 5. Sally's The End.
The money, to me, it's just an idea kind of thing. You know, like it's shit that we've lost that much money. But after everything else that I've been through, the whole situation in Hong Kong, the stress on the business, in theory, money is just an idea. It's not going to change our life forever. We're vulnerable. We're in an industry where we can be targeted for this kind of fraud, and we need to be way more careful. So I think what we did were the right things, and we've moved beyond it, and I'm looking forward now. I'm not looking behind. I feel like that's a pointless exercise, and I'm feeling good. It's like, despite everything that's going on in the world at the moment, I'm actually positive, and I feel a bit energized by change. It's my story, and I've been through so much, and I've come out, I feel, the other end. I want to empower other people who are going through shit in their lives to feel that there is hope and there can be a light at the end of the tunnel. Because when you're in the tunnel, it feels pretty awful. And I know that even, myself, you go there out searching for help. And the help that I found was in articles and reading things and reading people's stories that do have happy endings. That's what I wanted. I didn't want the stories that end in doom and gloom. I wanted to know that this can work out.
Chapter 6. Is this really the end? Among all the cultural and political turmoil, this really is a tale of two cities in one Hong Kong. Sally came from Australia, arriving into a banking job and then starting a diamond business. Tiffany was a beauty therapist in Kwun Tong, a place 4 stops from the end of the Green Line on the MTR. We end this story without a real resolution for either Sally or Tiffany. Sally didn't find a way to get back the money she lost, and Tiffany was so deep in a loop of crime, lies, and debt that she took the only way out that she could see. She spent the last months of her life chasing her own tail, stuck in a web that we can only assume was her own creation. So many questions still remain. Was Lisa the first in Tiffany's most recent line of cons? Were diamonds Tiffany's comfort zone? Now the world we live in is no more or less impacted, aside from a lingering debt, and a greater awareness on the part of a few diamond brokers that the perceived value of a diamond can become a very real deficit. And for Tiffany's sake, as well as all the people who got in the way of the diamond industry's progress, I'm sorry. This podcast was created, researched, and edited by Jules Hannaford. And we couldn't have done it without Sally Ryder and everyone else who helped us to tell this story. We're infinitely grateful to our experts, Drs. Scott and Shiloh, as well as Roger Grimes, and those who lent us their voices, Kinney Orbarlow, Sonia DeAndrea, and Matt Schnuth. The theme song is sung by Angel Meyerhoff, and the sound design is by Shade Furlong. Please consider going to our Patreon and supporting us with a once-off or monthly contribution. I'm Zara Hannaford, and I wrote this thing, and I've been your host.